Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, March 6th, and this is a special meeting of the Brookfield Board of Finance. If you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We will start the evening with our first public comment. I would like to note that this meeting is to review the Board of Selectmen's proposed budget. So with that, we'll be going through revenue, income, we'll be going through capital, and we'll also be hitting at least the finance department tonight, okay? So with that, do we have any members of the public that would like to make comment? Okay.
I'll be quick.
Just to the podium, please. And then state your name and address for the record, sir.
Yes, sir. Carmine Rossachano, 6 Big Buck Lane, Brookfield, Connecticut. My only comment is I went online to see what was going to be discussed tonight so that I wouldn't come in here ignorant of what you guys were going to be talking about, and I couldn't find anything that was online. So I would say that if you're going to have a special meeting, if you would post what you're going to be talking about online so that the residents could look at it before they come, that would be most beneficial and helpful, and it would eliminate many questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to give comment? Are these all one packet? This one's yours. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to new business. Mr. Dunn will take us through the Board of Selectmen proposed 2018-19 town budget.
So we're going to be going through this in some detail. So I put together a brief highlight that will list what I see as the main drivers of the budget. So as we look at this is what I see are the drivers. We have a lowering of state grants. That's about 0.47% of our overall budget. The grants are based on the latest cut from the state as to what exactly they're going to give us from OPM. That could still change. Insurance is up $226,000 is our estimate, and that's a 0.36% growth. Special education on the school side is $802,000 increase, which is 1.27% of the total budget. And the veterans and elderly, which we're adding back in, is 0.77%, so almost 1%. And salaries increases both mandated by contract and otherwise are 0.34% of the budget for a total of $215,000. The total of these items is $2,024,000, which represents 3.2% of the overall increase of the budget. We're not asking for any new staff this year. We're not asking for any major changes. We are fine-tuning the budget to make it more accurately reflect the real numbers as we see them, as we go through them, and we tighten them up from year to year. So that's pretty much it. We don't understand where the state is going to end up, so we have kept a contingency fund of $400,000 in case the state does cut our grants more, or we get more special ed expenses. It could happen. And otherwise our budget is pretty much straightforward what it was, very similar to the last few years. No major changes at all. I'm sorry, there is one change. We are going to ask for about $20,000 to do the, if you remember last summer, we did the hazardous waste recycling here in the parking lot. 400 and some odd residents of Brookfield took advantage of that. HRRA was able to absorb the entire cost because they get a lot of fees from the haulers, and we'd like to do that again this summer. If you look in behind the very first page of the agenda, it shows this is a breakdown of exactly what happened at that. It was very, very well received, and I'd like to do that again. It would be about $21,000 in expense.
And it's not in this current budget?
It's in the budget.
It is?
It's in there, yeah.
And that's your new ask?
Yeah, that's the only major change that I have.
Do you mind going to the mill rate tab? Just make it a little smaller, maybe we can get the whole thing on the screen. Ooh, maybe not. Okay. So the numbers that we're talking about from your budget overview and drivers, they obviously tie to this main,
Yes.
this main mill rate page.
Yep. Yep. That's where they come.
And you're saying that the 5 drivers that you have make up 3.2% of what's presented there.
Yep.
For expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit up.
That is correct.
Does anyone have any general top-line questions before we move into greater detail, more finite stuff? Okay, all right, let's go. So I would like to explore each line of revenue.
Sure.
While we're here. So if you could just take us through your assumptions, your backup, let's say,
Yep.
for each one of these, that'd be extremely helpful.
Yeah, sure. The current taxes, we're asking for $63,330,000. That's driven as a result of the increases in the lowering the state grants. That number is a number that you arrive at after you get all your other numbers. That's the number we would need to raise if we're going to have a balanced budget, and we don't change this budget at all. Prior year taxes are pretty close to what they were the year before. Our tax assessor and tax collector think they'll go up a little bit. Supplemental taxes are going down a good bit, and that's primarily because of people last year, they thought with the changes in the tax code, they wanted to pay their taxes as quickly as possible, so we got a big bump in the payments. That means this year we're going to get a little bit less in the supplemental. So that's why that's going down, and our tax collector, who's been pretty good at running these numbers, so that's going to go down from budgeted last year $535,000 down to $391,000. Interest, liens, and fees remain the same. This is our estimate on that, and the $48,000 for telephone access is what we've gotten from the state.
Now the supplemental taxes,
Yeah.
a lot of that is driven by vehicles, right?
Almost all of it's vehicles.
Okay.
When people register a car after October 1st,
Yep.
right, then it rolls into the next fiscal year, and so we send out the bills, and it takes a little while to process, and so that's why we got that bump, because people found out what their taxes were and then paid them in last year.
Yep. So what do we do as a town to make sure that everyone, let's say, who lives in town or Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
right, registers their vehicle here, right? We have students in the schools, we have people that live here, and I know for a fact that there's some folks that do live here that have out-of-state plates, but they have a residence here and they send their children to school here. What are we doing we're all in a pinch, right? No one wants to pay more taxes, but if you live here, your vehicle should be registered in Connecticut and you should be paying your taxes. So what are we doing to make sure? Is there an audit process in place?
No, not really. If somebody notifies us that somebody has a car, a vehicle, that seems to be in Brookfield all the time, and they know it's owned by somebody who lives in Brookfield and their kids go to school, our tax assessor will take that and approach the property owner and say, listen, I think you have a car here that should be registered in Connecticut. Oftentimes what you see is these cars are registered in LLC's names. It's a very tough one to go. We're primarily relying on the honor system, that people are doing the right thing. I know a friend of mine has a business in Danbury, and Danbury's pretty tough about it, and he also has a business in Brewster. It's the same business, but it's incorporated differently. And occasionally his vehicles will move from Danbury to Brookfield and vice versa. And he got tax bills from Danbury for 2 vehicles that spent the night one night in Danbury, but they're really used almost exclusively in Brewster. So he went through the process and explained to them what happened, and they took that off. It's not an easy thing to do. Thankfully, it's not many, but I would encourage everyone, if you know that someone has got their car and their vehicle and they live here, the kids go to school here, this is their residence, because a lot of people do have houses here who are not residents, then tell us and we'll go after them.
Is it something where we could join forces, let's say, with the school system, where we require re-registration? Use the registration at the schools, make sure that those folks have
I think
vehicles
it's a little
registered?
stickier because the schools does have privacy rules that they can't avoid, right? They can't be telling us, okay, we got these 8 kids here in this school, and this is where they live. But they also have the same problem with students coming from out of town.
I think it's been done in other places. Let me get my bearings about me to find out. I know it's been done other places with school registrations used to drive supplemental taxes. So let me
we can look at that.
let me look back into that and let you know where the precedent is. New Canaan?
Yes,
Okay.
Canaan.
Thank you. So it's been done in this state. And if we're in a pinch like we generally are,
Do you really
with
think this
revenue,
is a big problem?
I want to know that it's not a big problem.
You know, I don't see it. I don't see a lot of out-of-state license plates driving around. I just don't.
What boats? I mean,
I'm sorry?
boat registrations, I would fall into that category as well.
They pay an annual fee.
Yeah.
They don't.
Oh, okay.
They don't pay like a property tax.
They
all
pay
goes-
property
it's
tax
part
on
of
the
registration
trailer.
fee.
Oh,
You know, so I pay like $40 a year on my trailer. We are charging people for their golf carts now.
It's a vehicle.
Yeah. Well, our new tax assessor was driving around town, and there is a community that has a lot of golf carts, and those are personal property and they're taxable. So everyone she found, she sent out a tax bill. We have some very irate residents, but fair is fair. If you own the vehicle, it's here in Brookfield, it's got value, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, you should be taxed on it. And 2 people came forward and said, I didn't know that, and told her they owned them, although she didn't know it. So that's a good thing. So we're looking for every possible avenue to garner the right taxes from people.
A lot of new businesses probably don't know that they have personal property taxes on all the equipment in their buildings. So when they register to the state, I mean, usually there's this laundry list of every possible thing you could possibly owe everybody, but it's
You know,
if you don't know.
especially for small businesses,
Yeah.
the personal property tax is really tough. It's hard for people to understand, and it's hard for us to get them to report to us exactly what they do own. And if they don't tell us that they got rid of a computer, we're going to continue to tax you on that. There are also severe penalties for not filing. It's really expensive.
Say 25% of your
Yeah, it's really expensive.
assets penalty.
And so people have a problem with that, but you know what? You have a business, you own property that is owned by the
So the
business.
assessor
Yeah.
can see who registers a business and kind of.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's up to them to make the declaration as to what their personal property is.
Right. No, I get that.
Anything else on the total property taxes? Any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you.
Okay, so in the intergovernmental revenues, the numbers we have here are the exact numbers that OPM told us are currently the numbers that we will receive. They could change. If they do change, they would probably go down. One number is changing, the LoSiP grant. We, on Friday, late Friday afternoon, I got notice, the LoSiP grant is now going to be 190,237, I believe. Let me get you the exact number.
Should I? Yeah. You said 190.
190,237. And that's the only one that we know is changing. So it's going up about $60,000.
190,237.
Yeah.
Steve, can I ask on the line below that, the state-owned property? Last year was 18,000. What qualifies as state-owned property?
Oh, when the state owns a piece of property and they do pilot payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
So if they own a property, and let's say a garage,
Yep.
like they have up in New Milford,
Yep.
they'll give the town something towards that,
Okay.
even though they're not required to pay taxes.
What did we have last year that we don't get this year then?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's the 18,000?
Down to
that we-
300.
No, it's 300. Municipal stabilization grant you're talking about?
No, the state-owned property line. I
Yeah,
didn't-
they were not getting that this year.
Right.
They still own the property, we're just not getting it.
Oh.
It's like
okay.
$300 we're getting.
Yeah.
Oh.
How are you gonna handle the proposed cuts that Malloy's put out there? Because he's got it on the website, if you download it today, he's got $999 in the ECS grant, and he cut the municipal grant from $274 down to $120. And that's what he's got published on the website right now. So there's $300,000 that
That's
you're
his-
looking at.
Yep, that we have a contingency fund.
That's,
Contingency fund, we really didn't utilize all the way this year like we
We're
had in
gonna
the
use
past.
almost every penny of
Yeah,
our
but we didn't
contingency.
really utilize it for what we said we were gonna utilize it for. We had pretty broad brush of what it was for. It was 300,000 for Board of Ed, it was 180,000, 600,000 of that we had established for certain costs, and they seemed to go into other areas. We took 150 for insurance, we took 100 for this. It wasn't really how we outlined the contingency fund, what it was utilized for.
That's why you have a contingency fund.
I don't mind having a contingency fund, but if you know going in that this 1144 for ECS is not gonna be 1144, then you
We
should.
don't
build
know
it.
that. We're going off of what they've actually said you are gonna get today. What Malloy has said, remember, he wanted to give us $2.5 million in teacher salary expense. So his desires are not as firm as what the actual state has told us. I could say I want $69 million from the town. That's just saying something. We just have to, I think we have to go with the numbers that the actual state has, or the legislature has already committed to us.
So if we go
Malloy wants to
historical-
change those, we should be aware of them, you're right, Dan, but you chase your tail. If we changed our budgets every time Malloy changed his mind, we would have had 64 different budgets so far this year. So I think we have to go with, this is my opinion, what this legislature has so far allocated to the town of Brookfield. That may change.
2 years ago, what happened to his projected budget? What did we lose on the education side 2 years ago? 130,000. What did we lose last year? 160,000. So pretty much, if he says these small cuts are going to happen, they seem to have happened. Historically, 2 years in a row running, we've taken hits on these accounts.
Yeah, that was done by the legislature.
But historically, 2 years in a row. Now, a pattern shows we lose about 130, 150,000 a year.
150.
If you guys want to cut the budget, you can cut the budget. I use the numbers that the state has given us so far.
Okay.
I just don't.
And the same thing goes for the municipal stabilization grant. That's also cut in half. That's going from 270 to 120 on Malloy's
You
projections.
could.
But again, the presentation of all this is where the revenue is at what was stated, and the proposal has that shortfall covered in the contingency. So I understand what you're saying when you say that the contingency wasn't all used for what we had broadly intended it for in this past fiscal year.
It becomes a lot of money that sits out there that's just able to be grabbed. It becomes an awful lot of money sitting there. We wouldn't allow the Board of Education to have that kind of money sitting there at their disposal at any one given time. We hold them to a very tight standard as the Board of Education, and that's a lot of money to be sitting out there.
Quite a few boards of ed do have their own contingency funds. Ridgefield's trying to do it in this year's budget.
Yeah, less than 1% of their budget, 430,000 or
So
something.
it's not unprecedented that boards of ed, by the
But-
mere nature of
but-
what a contingency is, you don't know what expense you're going to have, but you're protecting the town from a supplemental tax bill or having to eat into your general fund.
I agree with that. I think it's a reasonable assumption are that these are the high end of the numbers, that they're not gonna go up from there, and
No.
it's highly likely they're gonna go down.
I agree with
So
that. They're not gonna go up.
I would, I mean, we're not gonna set a number today, but I would suggest that it's a lower
Yeah.
number.
I don't think it'll be as heavy as last year when we had 702,000 in a contingency. You know, they made the big cut this year. If they make another cut, I think it's going to be something less. But again, you know, we're looking at a crystal ball here, and we're making our best guess based on the best information we have today. Could change.
So again, the 1.1, so all of this, the intergovernmental, was, we received that information from the state, and that's
Right.
the latest that we have right now.
Yep.
So according to the state, we're gonna get 1.97 million
Mhm.
in state funding.
Right. Correct. So if we look at charges for services,
Just one
I'm
second,
sorry, go
before we
ahead.
move on from there. Can you explain what the municipal stabilization grant is?
it's a grant the state gives towns to stabilize the municipality. How they, honest to God, that's the explanation I got. That's the
There's
explanation.
no
I
other
got.
explanation, in fairness to
Okay.
Steve on that.
You don't get
just-
it good. It's, oh, well, we know we're whacking you on ECS and on this and on that, and so we've come up with our own formula, no one knows what it is, to make you a little more whole.
Consolation prize.
That's exactly.
I agree with Glenn, it's not a good way to do it, but I'd rather just have a formula. Just tell me what the number is, and we'll live with it, and we'll work with it.
Thank you.
I know that doesn't answer your question.
No, it does, that's what it is.
When we look at charges for services, usually we're pretty steady here. Land use, we think is going to go down a little bit. So we went from 482 in last year's budget to 440,000 this year. Town clerk, though, we think those fees will be going up a little bit as we streamline the department and get a few things. The selectman office doesn't change almost every year. It's the same. Now we got the vendor permits because we increased the fees for the vendors to, I think, $500 per person, because no one likes vendors knocking on their doors. And we may look at that and try to up that again this year, because that's one of the single biggest complaints I get is there's some stranger knocking on my door on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Why? And they call the police first, and then the police, and we have permits and they have their pictures on them. They're supposed to wear them around their necks, but it's still not a lot of fun. And the police don't issue a lot of tickets, so this is historically a better number than what we had last year, I think. And the fire marshal fees will come in around 50,000, and that's the new fees we implemented last year in the commercial establishments, so that we at least cover the cost of doing those inspections, and that's going very well.
Where are we draft-wise as far as what we've actually earned 17, 18?
For the fire marshal?
No, for all of that. Like, we budgeted 988,000. Where are we in actuals? I didn't bring my...
I didn't bring it either,
my
but we
closing
had it.
statement.
We had it in the first select, in the, Kimberly, do you have that from the, I'm sorry, the revenue numbers that we had? Do you have the financial report? I didn't bring that with me, that you gave to the Board of Selectmen.
Right here. You want it? Period 7?
I think we're pretty, Yeah.
What's the question?
yeah,
Where
we're
are
pretty
we
close,
in terms
right?
of actual...
We're at like 50,
You're running, you're running overall,
For what's budgeted for the charters.
actually, your land use is down.
Yeah.
Your land use is running less than 50%.
That's what we
But it
cut it.
depends on the cyclical part of it as well, right? On your reconveyance fees, you're doing very well.
Mhm.
You're at 84%.
Yep.
But on your other ones, you're down. And is it cyclical or not cyclical? Like, are some of these that come in?
Conveyance fees are usually cyclical because most people sell their houses in the spring. Also, building permits are very cyclical. Spring and summer are when most of those permits come out. But based on the numbers we had from last year, that's why we lowered it to 440 for land use. Now, if we get a big project, you know, like the supermarket we discussed, that could give us $30,000-$40,000 in fees, like that. It could. So, we guess low, and we'd rather guess low and then come in a little bit higher next year. There are a number of other projects coming up that we think will generate quite a few fees. Now, and also zoning, you know, we redid all the zoning, and the ad hoc committee put that together. That zoning rewrite is with the zoning board right now, and they're going through it section by section by section. They are also considering changing their fees because we put together an analysis of all the surrounding towns as to what they charge for various, you know, building permits and this permit and that permit. And ours are, in some cases, very, very different than other towns. So we don't want to hurt our revenue stream, but we certainly want to remain as competitive as possible. So they're looking at that and may take up a new fee schedule. I think that would be revenue neutral to the town. So we wouldn't lose any money. We might gain a little bit.
So do we have something more than budget for the charges for services where we're ending up for this year we just wrapped up?
We can get you more information. I think isn't there some in your report? Let's see.
Is that the period 12 financials committee?
I mean, what we do is
This
I
is
ask
from
each of the
units,
department
but
heads to
it's
go
not
through.
the same
I'm sorry, what were you-
structure
Yeah,
as the
no, that-
reports you get because of the chart of account change. So I would have to dig through it to pull those numbers. I can do that, but it's taking.
But historically, these fees have, if you look at them, they're actual versus what we budget. They don't do huge jumps.
Let's have that. Let's have actual revenue before we start our deliberations, please.
Okay.
And when you're talking about the revenue estimate form, can they get redone? Because these aren't.
In what sense?
Budget for current year for land use doesn't really make sense on some of the fees lines. And the town clerk has a projection of $630,000 worth of revenue on the forms that we got. They're not making 630. She doubled the
She,
318. I know what she did, but I don't blame her for doing it. I'm not saying it was done intentionally. I'm not saying it was done.
Okay. We'll look at-
I met with her and we went over that and she understands that it needed to be corrected. Yeah.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. If we're going to talk about the revenue estimates, it would be nice to have the numbers correlate back, because that number didn't hit back to the right amounts.
Okay.
And the same thing with your land use estimate. That revenue makes no sense whatsoever, because you have 15, 16, 45,000, 16, 70, 46,000, then 17, 18, you jump to 230,000, and year to date you have 26,000. So that numbers don't add up.
This was the first year that the directors filled out those forms, so I actually redid the revenue for them.
Okay, so I mean, if we're gonna use them, we should put them in the books. Let's just,
We'll double vet those numbers, make sure that.
thank you.
Investment income, that's pretty straightforward, it's 29,000, that's what, we think it'll be higher, but that's the number we're going with right now.
Hold on, Steve, what's the year-to-date on that right now? It's like
Investment income?
65,000.
It's 62.
65,000.
At the end of January, 62,000 is what we've earned on our eligible balances.
17, 18.
Yeah, year-to-date,
Yeah, sorry,
62,000,
fiscal
not
year to date, so
35.
since July 1st up until January 31st, we've earned about 62,000.
Okay,
So that's the full year. You're looking at almost triple,
Yeah.
quadruple
Yeah.
what we have in the budget.
I would have thought it would go up, but not, interest rates have not changed that
Well,
much.
that's why,
Yeah,
that's why
okay.
it's gotta get looked at, how much cash we're carrying, what the interest is. I mean, that number should be something we should be able to get within 10%.
Yep, I agree.
For deliberations.
So
120K.
I have a,
This is double actual.
this is the final number now, after the audit adjustment.
You have 53
Yep,
as year to date,
yep. No, this is last
for the
year.
whole year.
Last year.
So So we had 53 last year,
Are
okay.
you still talking
So we
about
had
interest?
53,503 last year.
Are you still talking
So
about
why are we
interest
putting
earnings?
25 in this year and not making that? I understand you can't nail it, I get that,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if we
yeah.
did 52 this year, we got 65 already year to date, that number should be a
Much
little closer.
No, it should be, you're right. You're
John,
absolutely right.
that's starting over, right? You're not looking at a cumulative balance last year through this year. you're
Right,
looking
so I
at-
specifically asked our contact
Cut.
union savings
Yeah.
for fiscal year to date, which
Yeah.
would imply July 1st up until, the most recent data he had was up to January 31st.
So the interest grew by 62K, or that's?
Yeah, yep,
Okay, all right.
yep.
Thanks. Fine.
Right, exactly, it's starting at 0.
Assuming it's not like a fixed rate.
No, it's an overnight repo.
Yeah, we're very limited on what we can invest in. There's a state stiff that we can invest in, or overnight straight repo, which most communities, that's what they do. You get securities for giving them the cash. It's required by law. On our miscellaneous income, that $27,000 is the rent that we get from 49 Federal Road. We're now waiting for the state, and have been for about 4 months. They got about a 60-department process to approve the sale of that property to us, so that we can then turn around and sell that property to the owner of 49 Federal, and that's all we're waiting for is the state. But until such time as that goes through, he's paying us $2,250 a month rent. He's been sending us certified checks every single month. If you remember, we hadn't gotten paid in 4 years. And so last year he made good on all this back rent, about $149,000, and we renegotiated a new lease. So as soon as we get there, we will. And then the cell tower rental is gone up because we're going to get a full year out of it. Now, if the company that owns the cell tower gets more companies to use his cell tower, our rent goes up. He said he doesn't see anybody doing that right now, but you never know. That would be nice.
What companies use it now?
AT&T. He's got AT&T on there.
Any questions? We do have 3 folks who haven't been through this process before. If you guys have any
Yeah, ask any
questions
questions.
on any of this whatsoever, at the moment. You don't have to hold your peace, and after this moment, but as we're going along, please just don't hold back. Thank you. Okay. And then no other funding sources to note.
And that's it for the revenue side.
You guys want to put more emphasis on expenditures or capital? Because the expenditures, we do have the departments coming in.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through capital and see what the thoughts are for that?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. All right. Steve, if you would take us through the items of capital, please.
Yeah, okay, so for capital, again, this year, we're following the same process we did the year before and the year before that, in every year increasing the amount that we will consider using borrowing for. So this year, I made it $30,000. Some of our neighbors have numbers of $250,000 and $300,000. I think that's a very good thing, but we have to work our way back there. We can't do everything for cash at once, or we'd have a 10-12% increase in our overall tax base, and I don't think the residents would vote for that.
Before we move on from that, Steve, I would like us to consider putting in a policy, or at least documenting this. The fact that we started, I think, at 20,000, was it?
10, 20, 30 this year.
Yeah.
It's in the letter I
Yeah.
sent you, but
But I'd like us to look into having some sort of documented plan that we can refer to,
Yeah.
other than the annual cover letter, which is
Okay.
something that puts a commitment out there that we're going to try and put more of this into operating versus small bonds.
yeah, I agree that I could write up a policy on that. And while we're doing that, we should do it for the paving of the roads too, that policy. it's just not the right thing to do long-term borrowing every single year, I don't think. You know, do the big projects. You know, if you got something 300,000 and up, 250,000 and up, okay. If it's a long-term asset, it's going to be here for 15, 20 years, it's a building, whatever, do that. You know, some of the equipment, some of our big trucks, you know, we'll keep them 15, 20 years. So, okay, I can see spending, you buying a truck for 2.25, okay, that you can borrow for that. But some of the other things, and it's hard to get out of that hole once you start borrowing for smaller things, it gives you lower tax increases to start with. But over time, eat up your borrowing capacity, and you're going to have to pay the piper at some point. So we can do that.
I see the word reserve up there. So we no longer have a reserve fund. So now that fund has been moved and consolidated with another fund, with the cash to capital fund, at the recommendation of our auditors. So I've dissolved the fund, they dissolved it for last year, and I dissolved it for this year and reclassed the expenditures.
Do we have a better name for that?
Yeah,
That is the name that was assigned to it by Bloom Shapiro, but I can try and update it.
That was the name that was assigned to it by someone else.
You talking about cash to capital?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't like that phrase.
So what would you like it to be
confuses
called?
the hell out
No,
of me.
just something else.
Is it cash or is it capital? And in some businesses, cash is capital. In banking, cash is capital.
Well, because there's
But
a...
most businesses, it's not.
We'll think of something else.
So 3,600
Yeah.
would be the cash to capital, and then 3,605 is the bonded capital, or just called capital. So we can't change it to just capital, so
We'll
it's
think of something.
something
I'm
to
confident we'll think of
identify
something.
it, so.
Okay, so we went through, the Board of Selectmen went through each of these items and decided what we could do this year. You know, given the state cuts in the grants and all the other issues we're facing this year, this was a tough year to really put money way aside. You know, if we put money, if we reserve it, we then encumber it from year to year, right?
Yes.
So
We'll have to receive something in
I
writing.
think that's a good idea for big purchases, you know, just put money aside. And so, but this year, the board has recommended that we don't reserve for the turf fields. Dennis DePinto had put in the high school, you've got it in your books, that he would replace 4 tennis courts with 5, all new fences, all new lighting, all new lining, everything brand new, with courts that would be guaranteed because they're concrete and they're cord and they have post-tension, they call it, that holds the concrete together. It's guaranteed for a lifetime almost. But I'd love to do it, but we just don't have it right now with the schools coming up and some of the other big projects. I'd like to see us get to the point, we do have in here the $300,000 for Tecton to do the second stage of the design for the schools. We need to do that. I absolutely think we should do that. So we know where we're going to stand with the schools, because everyone's on tenterhooks, and I think it's one of the reasons the library didn't get approved, is because people said, hey, I don't want to take a chance on a library until I know exactly what the schools are going to cost and that we can afford it and what it's going to cost. I think a lot of people use that reason to vote no for the library. And I don't think anyone would disagree that our schools need work. You can argue which building needs the most work, but I think most of us agree on one building. So Tecton will come back on March 27th. There will be a presentation. It's March 27th, right, Colette? At the high school, and I urge everyone to join, because that's going to give us a good indication of where we should be going with this. And then we need to hire them to give us the final estimate and the final plan. And they can do that. We're hoping to go to referendum in this fall, right? So they can do that pretty quickly. And I think we should do that. We should have been working on the schools years ago. So I would recommend it.
Let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Well, it's all the same thing. All of these, you know.
Yeah, can you go through the ones that you've suggested moving forward on, just a quick, 2 seconds on each one? Just, a couple dozen.
Well, you can see which ones
Anything.
I said postpone, which
Yeah.
ones to pay for cash, and which ones to borrow. Parks and Rec does need that F-550 truck. You see the documentation in the supporting documentation. I would like to get, I think we should get the aerator that helps our fields and cleans it up. And those things last a long time. And then we should, if we're not going to build new tennis courts at the high school, we should crack seal them. We put that off last year, and the crack sealing does extend the life of the tennis courts. Maybe too far gone this year, but we should at least try to do that.
Why did you postpone the aluminum leaf and chip box? Did I miss that?
Because after, in our opinion, and after having talked to Dennis, that the aluminum leaf chip box was a very nice thing to have, but they do it with plywood now. It takes a few hours to put together, but you got to draw the line somewhere. Either pay cash for it or don't do it right now. You could go either way. I could see going either way. On the assessor,
And on the aerator, the 26,550.
right?
That's below the $30,000 guideline.
It is.
This goes to the long-term asset.
Right, but in this case, given the budget that we had, I did put it there.
So that's just the budget. That's not because it's a longer-term asset. It's just
No,
purely.
it lasts like 15, 18 years. The current one we have is really old. But when Dennis explained it to us, and we'll probably ask Mary to come in and help out if you want them to meet again, he believed that the new aerator would save like 4 or 5 hours a week in time for his staff. You know, at $40 an hour, that adds up, and they use this from the end of March right through into November. So it would, in a sense, almost pay for itself in time saved. Right. In the assessor's office, we are going to have to upgrade the system because
the rest of the stuff. So
we've
the center
decided
school-
not to do it. Just had to make some tough decisions. Right. Excuse me.
Obviously, there's no safety issues with postponement.
No major safety issues.
There's no drainage issues at center school?
No, if it rains, sometimes it gets a little damper than we'd like it to be.
Okay, I'm gonna just, alright, that's fair.
It's not a perfect situation, but
But it's not causing any.
no. If Dennis thought it was dangerous, he would tell us immediately whether it was dangerous or not. The one thing on here, tie into the septic, roof, doors, floor, BHS building. You know, Parks and Rec has a building down here that they keep all their equipment and stuff in. It is in woeful need. It's leaking, and it really needs some help. And I think we put these items have been in the budget year after year after year, and they've not gotten done. So I think we should do that. We have to maintain our assets. On the assessor's system, that we're going to be required to make an upgrade because they're going to stop supporting the current version of the system we have, but we have until 2020 to do it. So I'm suggesting that when we upgrade the system, we do that next year. It's not a critical need at this point.
It's a one-time cost, not a license?
It's a one-time cost on the license we upgrade, and then you have your normal annual maintenance. But to switch from the one version to the next is $20,000.
Can you put a note in there? Next to it, license fees would be in the operating budget. So on the side of that when it comes up next year.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. In Public Works, we got an 18-year-old roadside mower that is starting to fall apart. It's 18 years old. It's used, 7 months out of the year, and the documentation is in there. I think we should replace that. We have a 1990 Ford truck. You've also seen that in the supporting documentation. That needs to be replaced. The streets.
What do we do with the old equipment?
I'm sorry?
What do we do with the old
We
equipment?
sell it.
Yeah.
We sell it through, there's a government website we sell it through, or we actually just go out to bid and ask people to come in and.
And that's not an old return, you can't budget for what
Yeah,
that's gonna be.
yeah. Typically, things like that, you're not getting a ton of money for it, a couple $1,000. It's
So
more
we
like-
wouldn't budget for capital gains on a sale of an asset, no.
Yeah. I mean, we would get a little bit. On the street sweeper, I did have Jerry Gay go out and look at what it would cost to outsource it, street sweeping. It's between $40,000 and $55,000 a year. The street sweeper will last between 12 and 16 years. Seemed like a no-brainer. If you're gonna pay $50,000 a year to have some company come in and street sweep, using our own, it just makes more sense and saves more money.
Is that an item that could be cost shared with other towns? I mean, that just seems like it's not used all year round. You usually see
Actually,
it after.
we use it almost year round.
Okay.
They do use it consistently throughout the year.
Okay.
You don't see a lot of it, but they do. I asked Ralph that exact question. It's a good question, but they do use it because that would be great if you could share a piece of equipment. You use it for 2 months, and I use it for 2 months. The Vector truck tanks, we're going to keep the truck that we have, but the tanks on them. This is to suck out the grates, the street grates. The tanks are rotting, but the truck's in good shape. So we just want to replace the tanks in the back of the truck, and that's $40,000. Mini excavator, in talking to Ralph in Public Works, that's a really nice to have, but it's the sort of thing you can go out and if you really need a mini excavator, your current equipment's too big to get into one spot, we can rent it for $300-400 a day. How many days a year are you actually using it? It's a real nice to have, but I just didn't see it as something. If we were using it every day or 4 times a week, but it didn't sound that way to me with Ralph. And you can see that everybody has. I've asked each department to rank their needs in the left column. Then replace the air conditioning unit at the garage. It's 30 years old. It's incredibly inefficient. It's probably going to go. And I said, let's go ahead and do that. Again, 2000 Ford truck.
You said let's postpone the
No.
the AC unit. Oh.
No,
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was looking at the wrong one.
And I'm saying we should replace the 2000 Ford truck. The ABS is going on it. It's a mess. And 2000 to 2017, 18-year-old truck, that's pretty good. We've been replacing 2 heat pumps in the town hall every year. I think that's a good investment. They're much more efficient units we're getting now. The parts and supplies for the existing equipment, it's 30 years old. It's hard to come by. We've been pretty lucky. In paving the roads in cash, we went up another $100,000 to $850,000, and saying do $650,000 in borrowing. I think this is a good plan, and spending $1.5 million a year is getting us right where we need to be, to the point where what we'll be able to do, instead of doing a full replacement of a road, we can stay ahead of it, and then every 8 to 10 years you do what they call a mill grind, and it's about half the price. Get you beautiful smooth surface, but if you let those roads deteriorate too much, you have to take the whole road up. But if you stay on top of it, and that's a fair percentage of our roads, we're already doing that. The roads are in good enough shape so we can save some money on that. So I would suggest that we continue to do that, and next year put $950,000 in cash. The air conditioner at the library, last year we put one of them off. It died. We replaced it. It was about $9,400. The second one there is exactly the same age, and I think it will go, and I don't want to get stuck where somebody really holds us up. We got lucky last year. Mulvaney Mechanical had the piece of equipment we needed in their shop. Otherwise, it would have been over 2 weeks to get it, and then we wouldn't have been able to use the library for 2 weeks in July. So I would suggest that we do that. I put off designing and engineering the windows at the library. Right now, it's tough. The new fuel tanks down at Public Works, our original request and original design included a canopy over the fuel tanks. The overall cost came in too high, so we eliminated the canopy. I think the canopy is a good idea. It protects our tanks. They'll last a lot longer. It protects there's a lot of delicate equipment under there, pumps and things. I think it's a good idea to do that. So I've suggested that we go ahead and borrow for that. I put off replacing the windows at the town garage, again, because of cost. The same thing with the carpet at the police station. If we're going to be doing work on the police station in the next few years, we can hold off for right now. The carpet's not in great shape. It's not good looking, but it's serviceable.
It's going to last another 3 to 5 years before shovel goes in the ground there?
Yeah, well, if it doesn't, then we can make that determination. Okay. Or they'll have a design and say, hey, we're not touching this section. Go ahead and replace the carpet. I don't want to put down carpet and then 2 years later rip it out.
Yeah.
Exterior lights at the police station. This is, again, I think a nice to have, not a need to have. They've got those they look like new lights to me. If you drive by the police station, it looks like, I don't know, 3,000 watts each. They're pretty bright. And the same thing with design and engineered town hall restrooms. I think our restrooms work. We're not getting a lot of complaints.
But for those lights though, they're currently in working condition, right?
The ones at the police station?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's bright as all get out.
This is good.
Yeah. For the police, again, our standard policy has been for the last, I don't know how many years, every year we replace 3 marked patrol cars. They do need computer software, which I'm saying we should pay for in cash, because if you borrow for computer software, it's a taxable event. You know, we'd have to issue a taxable bond versus non-taxable. They asked for 1 pickup truck. I think we can put off with that. They would use it to tow their trailer and some of their sign thingies, you know, that they pull. We have enough trucks in town. If they really need a truck, we can probably borrow one from either Parks and Rec or Public Works. Not a perfect scenario for them. It's a little more work to get that. The traffic radar, I think we should do that. The units that they have are out of warranty. And the e-bikes, which while I think it's a great idea, these are motorized electrical battery bikes so that 2 officers could patrol the Still River Greenway and the new downtown. I think, again, it's really nice to have.
At a maximum of 20 miles, 30 miles an hour, as opposed to getting to someone on the Still River Greenway on foot.
Yeah, good point.
But they have a
regular
gator,
bike.
they've got
Good
the
point.
little gator for the Silver River Greenway.
Yeah, we had to get the gator out. These
I've
would be,
experienced that.
these would sit right on the back of police cars, you know, so they take it off and
Yeah.
go. And Jay did make a good point. He says, we can't have our police officers getting to a site to help people and they're exhausted, can't breathe. So I think it's a great idea. Right now with the budget the way it is, we have to make some tough decisions. For the fire companies, we're very much where we were before. Candlewood is asking for a $300,000 reserve. I just don't think we can do that. So I said we should put, $75,000 towards new apparatus. I do think we should insulate their second attic because that will save some funding. They wanted a new command vehicle. I just don't see that right now. They'll talk to you. Thermal imaging camera, they wanted 2 new ones. They've got ones that work for right now. So what I would say on that is if something dies and it doesn't work, you absolutely need it, you can always come back to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. And they wanted a new boat for $250,000. I just don't see the need for that right now. I just don't. We got a new boat this year for $11,000. The new boat that they want, they'll describe it for greater detail when they talk to you, but I just didn't see it right now.
I've asked the fire departments, the center, directly, and I have to get to Mr. Murphy from Candlewood, but I've asked them to come prepared with, for their budget presentations, with a chart of when their apparatus needs to be replaced and when they would need their funding in place. So we can compare that to any funds that they've raised privately versus how much the town has set aside for these things. And I think that'll help us make a decision on how critical those apparatus, ambulance, fire truck reserves really are. Because we haven't met their request in the last couple of years. And that's got the potential to go sideways on us if we're not careful. So
I know that Candlewood is put together and they've given it to us. I think you have it in here exactly when they believe equipment needs to be replaced, right? So even if we're not reserving the full amount that they want, remember they're using a 5% inflation factor. Sure. So they're playing on the safe side. If we had 80% or 75% of the purchase price of a new piece of equipment already set aside, it's a huge difference. Even if we didn't have 100% set aside. The only thing on that is on the ambulance reserve, we should put the full amount for the ambulances because we replace one of them every 4 years. So if you don't put it aside every year, you're going to have to come up every 4 years with more money. And these guys this year, they've got a plan to save some money. They're going to keep the box of their ambulance and just replace the chassis. And that'll save around $40,000. So they're working pretty hard at trying to save money and make the best use of the assets that they're doing. So for Candlewood, Center Fire, again, I said headquarters company, they asked for $126,000 in reserve. Again, I said put $75,000. The ambulance reserve, I said put the full amount. They have 2 Lucas CPR devices now. They would like a 3rd one for the 3rd ambulance. We're starting to run. It's something that's nice to have, but again, it's a great thing to have. They also wanted an incident command vehicle, and again, I just don't see we can do that right now.
Wait, so we agreed on an additional ambulance, but not a CPR device for that ambulance?
Not an additional ambulance. We're turning in one of our ambulances,
Okay.
taking the box off of it and putting it on a new body. We are buying 1 new ambulance right now.
Got it.
That's been in the schedule, been in the works for 4 years.
But it won't have it. Are we going to be short a CPR device?
Yes and no. We don't use the 3rd ambulance all the time. We use it when there's emergencies or when there's a high demand. We typically have 2 ambulances that are working right now. The chances of 3 people having heart attacks at exactly the same time is pretty slim. There is a chance, but it is pretty slim. The chances of having 3 ambulances out there.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
It's. I don't know. If you're going to have the ambulance, I think it should be fully equipped.
This is
Yeah.
a decision we can
Right.
make during the
That's
deliberations.
fine.
It's a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Have further conversation with the actual. The gas detector meter replacements, theirs are out of warranty and they do need to be replaced. This is a safety item. When guys walk into a building, these things measure the gas, CO2, or everything. So I think we should do that. Remodel the bathroom, again, I put that off. Their HVAC control system, they have just a mess over there. And I'll let them describe it to you in greater detail. But yeah, they got the switch and a timer, and I think it will save money in the long run and also keep the facility running well. And then on the brick replacement, after looking at the pictures of it, I think if I don't think we're going to spend $23,000 to repoint the brick and clean it. But if we don't do something pretty soon, a lot of the pointing is completely gone in the first 4 feet of their columns and the facade. So if we don't fix it pretty soon, it's going to become a really expensive job. So I think we should do that. And if we do that, that should last a pretty long time. On the public library, they asked for computer replacement just to save some money. I thought they could, eke on by with some of the computers and take $4,000 off of their request and spend $8,500 on computers. They still have come down in price, so they can. I don't think we'll cripple them by doing that. When we move to public education, this building is the primary recovery site for any emergencies that we have. The generator we have is 30-something years old. It came from the Army. It sits right outside the cafeteria. I absolutely think we should replace the generator and the transfer switch. It's an investment in the community and the safety of people here. We've seen pretty big storms. We've had people staying here for days at a time. During that October snowstorm, we had people here for 7 days, and I think we should do that. Also, the boys' locker room, I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's beyond uninhabitable. So I think we should do that, because that's something I think that will not change in any plan that the schools come up with. So we could do that. The outdoor restroom and food service and storage, right now I think we just need to put that off. Same thing with the coral risers. John and Colette have convinced me that the time and attendance system will save the schools a lot of money and time. So we have an automated way of keeping track of all the employees. They have a lot of employees. And
I'll say right now in deliberations, I disagree on the coral risers
Yeah,
exclusion.
I'll second that.
That's a silly $15,000 to take out, so.
Yep. And then the Tecton design, I think that's a no-brainer. We have to move forward for the schools. In technology, I don't have a lot of changes. Normal computer replacements, I brought that down a little bit on the town side. We do need to upgrade our network, continue to spread out to the cloud. Software licenses, that's what they are. And we did cut a little bit from our printers, which Donna is not happy with, but she will make her case to you to keep her printers. In land use, for the vehicle, we have a 2000, you've seen the pictures of it, 2000 Chevy, it's BK70. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell the fire marshal truck that our previous fire marshal used to the fire department. And they've agreed to pay $25,000 for it. That's market value of that truck. They will then make that the chief's car, I believe is what they plan to do it. So it's an incident command vehicle. and they'll equip it as they need to. And then what we'll do with that $25,000, we'll just buy a new vehicle for land use, so our net cost will be about $12,000. I think that's a good use of it. The health department, we do need to replace that 2001 vehicle. These cars are getting dangerous. On the fire marshal vehicle, what we're doing is we've been able to get one of the police vehicles, an SUV, coming off of their fleet, and we're going to be able to equip it without a lot of expense for our fire and the marshal department, so we don't need to spend that money. So we're not cutting it out, we're just doing it a little bit smarter. And then building design, I put this in here because at some point in the future, we're going to need to look at town hall and reconfigure the office spaces so that they're more efficient, that people aren't on top of each other. I don't know if you've been through into the land use fire marshal area. It's really a rabbit warren, and so I would like to, I don't think we can do it this year, but I wanted to put it on here so we have it there as a marker, that hire a company to come in, do the office design, you know, put in the cubicles and do it in a way so we have space to grow if we ever need to grow. Right now people are coming out of the seams because it's really kind of hodgy-podgy. It just kind of grew willy-nilly over the years and without any real thought. So I just left that in there. And then the assessor's office, we have the reval every 5 years. It costs about $400,000 a year. I think we should put the money away so that we don't get whacked all at once.
When was the last one?
Last year.
Can you scroll back up? Can I just ask why the land use vehicles in a bonded measure and not in cash if it's $12,000 net?
$12,000, we're gonna sell the fire marshal vehicle.
Right.
Right?
But why is it not in cash? I mean, why are we bonded? Why is that being added to?
Because, well, no, it should be in cash. You're right, it should be in cash, technically. I was thinking about the whole price of the vehicle.
Okay.
But, yeah. So I agree with you, it probably should go to cash.
You're looking strictly at the amount and not trying to match the useful life of the asset, right?
Yeah, no, we're trying to match, yeah, we are. Trying to
That
match
would
the
be
borrowing
fine.
with the useful life of the asset.
I agree.
Yeah. And that's it on capital.
Agree.
Anyone have any questions on anything capital related? Each department, as they roll through and make their presentation, they will also be presenting capital. So we'll get a more, not that this was lackluster by any means, but we'll get a more passionate presentation and pitch for every item within each department's purview.
That's true.
Okay. This was more to get an understanding of the decisions that were made by the Board of Selectmen.
Good.
Okay. So there's no other questions on revenue or capital. We can get to, we can go over the Selectmen Department tonight and the Finance Department tonight.
And I would also appreciate,
Yeah.
you know, in addition to the deep dive on those two, your high level, you know, introduction to what we're going to see from the various departments, and for the new people, what to expect in those presentations. Kind of your assessment of what was presented, your assessment of what you did, just kind of high level, 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
Would be helpful.
Yeah, when each department presents, I can give you a high level if you'd like.
Can we do some of that tonight?
I'm sorry?
I'd like to do a little bit some of that tonight so I can prepare for the each.
Sure.
Each of them.
You want to go through every department? There aren't a lot of changes, but yeah, we can do
Let's do the deep dive and see what time it is.
Hold on one second. Before we go on, the capital, when we talk about the capital, can you have Mr. Gay come with 3 quotes for these big ticket items? Like the mower 129, does he have 3 quotes out there to get us
He
in
will.
a ballpark, or
Yeah,
can you get
every
some
item.
idea, or any quote? I mean, is it?
Oh, before we go out to bid, yeah.
No, I mean, can we get something prior to approving 129,000 for a mower? Can Gary get us a ballpark number that he went out and got a?
Some of these,
Isn't it?
if you take
Okay.
a look, now I can't find, of course, a
All right,
single one.
never mind
but
then.
If you, I'm not saying they're 100%, but a lot of these, if you go to,
It shows you what's in there, and we've already done that, our department's already done the research.
That's
They're not
fine.
just saying.
some of them refer to the fact that they worked with Jerry.
Yeah.
Right, but I'd like to see the number, like
Yeah.
the
They've
actual
gone
quote,
through.
email quote or something.
Yeah.
Because if we can like the generator, $350,000. If that's $320, maybe we can utilize that for the center school stuff or utilize that for the schools.
The generator, I think we should really
Well, we're
call
not,
it
I
400.
have not really super vetted the school's requests as to what the prices are.
No,
So
I'm
we
just
can-
saying, like,
No,
if
no.
that's an example. If we have $350,000 and it's really $320,
Mhm.
I'm not saying cut to 30,000. I'm saying utilize it somewhere else down the
Mhm.
road for other items that we're leaving out.
We do have at least one more chance to discuss all things education with the Board of Education.
Right.
I think on
That was just a
next
big
Tuesday.
number. I didn't
Yeah,
pick it
yeah,
out
of
for
course,
the Board
of
of
course.
Ed. I just picked it out as a number.
Okay.
Is there a threshold that you would like to propose that we get the quotes or the workup from Jerry?
I think anything over 50,000, right? Because there's
Exactly.
room then maybe to put other items in. That's what I'm
Mhm.
saying is if we're putting 350 and it's 320 or 120 and it's 100, it allows us to put the risers in $15,000.
Okay, we'll do.
Would you want to see that presented with the department presentations?
Yeah, with the department, if they're gonna present capital and what they're requesting. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard, but I mean, if Jerry get 3 quotes or whatever,
Oh, I think you can get a good idea. I think
I
our
know it
departments
might
have
not
already
hold.
gone out and asked, what would this cost, right? So that my experience has been so far, if somebody says something's 125, it comes right in there within 5.
then let's just
8%.
make sure, that's all. It's not
Yeah.
a matter of, it's a matter of trying to get risers, it's a matter of trying to get other things put
I
in.
see your point. Yeah.
Is it also typical, so for like items like this aerator, you said it's gonna save about 4 hours a week at $4 an hour. Are we gonna actually see that savings in the budget when we see the salaries?
No, you're not gonna see a lowering of salaries.
Those salaried folks will do something else with that time, let's say.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So, over time, you save 3 or 4 hours a week on this, you save 3 or 4 hours a week on that, and this and that, and all of a sudden, you've eliminated having to hire another person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really hard to quantify that by going back and taking the incremental little pieces that saved you. You know, you sometimes have to look at it from the intangible and work forward. Well, while Kimberly's here, what do you want to do, the finance department?
Yeah, we can do
I'll let
finance,
her
selectmen,
Right.
either one. I mean, it's a toss-up, whichever one you guys want to do first, doesn't matter.
I don't have a lot of changes. So I have 3 sections. You have mine. So the only change that I made, well, I dropped the office supplies because last year we had more office supplies because we transitioned from the smaller office to the larger one, and we had some staffing changes, so we needed to buy bookshelves and desks and so forth. So obviously this year we don't have those expenses, so I dropped that down. So that was really the only significant change that I have there. Any questions in the controller's office section?
Just give us 1 second, because now we have the handout that has the actuals in there.
Okay.
Give us just 1 second to take a look.
Yeah, I tried to update that for tonight.
Where's your finance department in the handout that you gave us?
It's under controller. But I can give it to you here if you want.
It's controlled
It's
underneath
the
the
tax collectors line, so if you know where that is.
It's on your 3rd page, middle of 3rd page from the front.
Controller's office, holy Moses, there we are. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
elected official. That is Mr. Lucas, the treasurer.
Yes, that's correct.
As far as staffing levels, everything, are we good there? Properly execute the books, make sure there's proper segregation of duties, things like that, we feel comfortable?
Would I say we're perfect? No. But do we have the right number of staff? Yes, I think we do.
So you have 2 union positions in your department? Or 3? How many is that?
3.
Uh,
No, 2.
I have 2 union positions
Lisa and Savannah are.
and
union,
one
and our
exempt.
senior accountant is not.
Gotcha.
I had petitioned last year for a staff accountant, but that was turned down.
Did that need go away?
It would be nice to have a staff accountant because I have 2 clerk levels and then a senior level. I think it would certainly be beneficial.
Is there a, where this year is the expense for any temps that we're not necessarily anticipated coming from?
That's going to go into my line, into the non-union wages.
Go ahead.
To follow up on Dan's point, what have we spent in the current fiscal year on temps? Do we know off the top of our heads?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I just started receiving the billing on the temp, but I can look into that.
It's not a lot of money, because we've only had her for, we've had a temp for about a week and a half. Right, to fill us out on the recs. So it's not a huge amount of money right now, and I don't think it will be.
But I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. And for what we need to do for this audit and prepare for doing it again next year, I want to make sure that we have proper number and skills in place to make sure that these numbers hold. So
I would like a staff accountant then.
okay.
Or an assistant controller. There's a wide variance there in salary range, though, between a staff accountant and an assistant controller.
Okay.
On the travel and debt and dues, prior year you spent $2,000. This year we're asking for $6,000.
That is correct.
Why are we adding $4,000?
Well,
Historically,
we have additional people that are interested in going to the Munis conference, and also I'm a member of the Government Finance Officers Association, and I attend some of their conferences and trainings along with the other controllers in the area. I'm a member at a local level and a national level.
So last year, only one person went to the Munis conference from the finance department. We're hoping to have more than one go this year. Yeah, it gives you two and a half days of training.
Yes, but the
And that-
GFOA
And the
is
GFOA.
extremely beneficial in updates for GASB. I know that there's interest in the updates for the pension and so forth, so all that information would come from the GFOA. They also produce the Blue Manual, which there's a lot of trainings and coincides with GAP regulations. And I get updates on that and trainings weekly.
Are there online trainings that are utilized by the staff currently?
I utilize the GFOA trainings, so I get emails and then I sign up for them and just take them right at the desk.
Yeah.
Some of them I travel.
We do. This year we bought a 10-pack, a 10-day training from Tyler for the cost of 5 days. And we use those for the entire town hall, for AP training, all of the various things. But there are also online courses that our staff can take Those are advantageous and they work well, but sometimes there's nothing like going to a class and actually sitting down and talking to people next to you. How do you handle this? How do you handle that? You can really get a lot out of it.
Okay. So everyone has access to Tyler University, which is training on Munis and all the modules.
I'd like to see a lot of people use that.
Does the BOE finance staff also have access to that?
Yeah, we invite them to all the training classes and ask them which ones they'd like to. For the 10-day thing where we have somebody online actually training with us, yeah, a lot of the Board of Ed people have come over. We had a training today.
Today, they attended
There
a
were
training with us
10,
today.
12 people
Yes.
in the room getting trained, both from our side and from the Board of Ed. Unfortunately, our trainer said he only did one side entries.
Well, I was listening in, and he had recommended an entry that was inappropriate, so I flew from my chair and went in and corrected him.
So sometimes their people are usually pretty good, but sometimes you get somebody who's not an accountant or doesn't know accounting.
That's what he said. I'm not an accountant.
Yeah, I
so.
said it, not an accountant. So.
These are software people.
Yeah, they're software guys.
John, I think we talked about this before, but the issuance costs of bond issuances, they're capitalized or they're amortized in the bond itself?
They're advertising.
So it wouldn't designate as
Before we move on to public debt, though, is there any more questions for,
You're right, yeah.
for the town controller on those couple lines up there? All right, yeah, let's move on to public debt.
Okay.
Okay. Going out, Board of Finance is 2 lines,
What?
right below it, right?
Did you, I mean,
Board of Finance?
Yeah, because
Oh.
she's here.
There you go.
Are you under my?
She's secretary.
so the Board of Finance, yes, there are 2 lines for Board of Finance.
Okay.
Are they up there?
Next page, right below control.
So on the handout that we have, there are 2 lines for the Board of Finance.
Mhm.
One is the Commission Secretary,
That is correct.
Diane, and the other one is for the audit.
Yes.
Looking at what's been presented, I think there's a change in budget methodology from prior years to the current year's budget. There is $80,000 budgeted for 16-17, but when we did 17-18, that number did come down, and I believe that was because the Board of Ed and WPCA were putting it in their own budgets because that's how it was going to be paid. So it's not that the audit is costing us less, it's that the monies are in different.
More properly allocated.
There's allocations now.
So what is the full cost of the audit that we're projecting next year?
I would have to look at the contract. I can get that for you.
Because we have 60 here, Board of Ed has 25, so that's 85, and if WPC has money in theirs, that's gotta be 10, we're at 95,000. Is that what it's gonna cost us? is
I don't
95?
believe so. I
So
believe
we're
that's
likely to
high.
budget on that.
Because the
At
Board
least
of Ed has a
that sounds like-
It's
$25,000
too high.
line item.
Because the budget is gonna probably be less than the previous year.
But we have 60 in here, we have 25 in the BOE.
So I think this number includes the full audit, but we can look into that.
But then either we remove it from the BOE and let them, or we take it out of ours
Or we
somewhere.
allocate it.
Right.
Well,
I think it's a good idea to allocate it where it belongs. It just keeps
That's
things
fine, then,
cleaner.
but if we're at 85, we're over, then we should reduce down somewhere.
Yep.
Yep. The chair of the audit committee would reach out to the partner that we're working with over at Mahoney Sable
Yep.
and get an estimate.
We've asked for that.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait.
that-
We're currently
Don't we have a
at plus
contract?
what's for next year, yeah. See if we want to adjust any scope
What?
or anything like that.
Yeah,
that's
why
fine.
it's true, though.
there
We should
might
just
be-
get it right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
we'll have to request that from the audit committee.
Okay, then I'm not aware of that. Okay.
They should be able to get that for us pretty quickly.
Okay.
I would think. Are we comfortable with?
So there's likely an adjustment that we made if we're over budget.
It's gotta go down, yeah.
Right.
Are we comfortable with the board secretary?
I think she's fantastic. Right.
Ditto.
Okay, let's move on to public debt then,
Okay.
while the town controller and treasurer are here with
So
us.
these numbers are pretty solid. They came right from our
our advisor, our financial advisor. So if you look at this summary, does everyone have a copy of the summary from attached?
Section 10 of the binders has the backup and the summaries.
Backup, so this is right from Susan with the attached schedules. And I was able to verify these numbers and go over them with her. So I'm comfortable with them.
Dan, did you have any questions on the public debt?
Not right now.
Okay. Where's that?
Up
Oh, okay.
up there. Any questions on public debt?
John, you're comfortable with what's presented there? Okay.
Some liability insurance. We have that. So the workers' comp number that went up because we were audited, and that's the new number we have. And we did have a clean audit, no findings, but they adjusted some of the classification codes, so that's why you see an increase there.
What does that mean exactly? If we had a clean audit, why are our fees going up?
Well, the fees are based on the classification within the department, the job duty. So if they reclassify someone, you would see a lot of that, like in Parks and Recs and jobs that are more high risk.
I'll give you a perfect example, like Bobby, who works in a town hall. He could be considered an office worker, or like a public works guy.
Recreation.
Recreation, where it's a higher risk to get hurt, right? So they would look at him and say, what does he do all day long?
Right.
Is he lifting boxes, or is he sitting at a desk?
So they'll come in.
They look at each job and they classify.
They interview, they look at where the payroll's allocated, and then they reclassify every year and adjust the rate.
So it went up about 5% this year.
But we had no findings, so that was good. The municipal package, she said there weren't going to, the rep from Kerma said there weren't going to be any changes. The fidelity bond, that's, so I'm bonded, and the tax collector is bonded. So that's our bond, and then the town clerk is bonded.
Right.
And those are the fees associated with our bonds.
Questions, comments,
It is
concerns?
what it is, I guess.
Yeah, those are pretty fixed numbers.
Yeah.
So.
How often do we go out for quotes? I'm not suggesting we do it this year, but is that on a rotating basis that we just scour
In
them,
which
you know?
category?
The workers' comp and the municipal, the bigger ones. I mean,
Once a year.
you go out to market once a year and
No, we don't go
Oh,
out
no.
once a year.
Yeah.
We have gone out in the past. Kerma is owned by the municipalities in Connecticut. They provide very, very good rates, and every time we've looked, and if you look historically, you can't beat Kerma. They have incredibly good service, incredibly good support, a lot of training, and so there are 169 municipalities in Connecticut. I think 162 are members of Kerma
Yeah.
and do all their insurance through Kerma. And it's only for for Connecticut
Makes sense.
municipalities. So we're pretty comfortable that their rates are very competitive. The couple times we've checked, they were way better
Okay.
than other firms. But having said that this year, what I would like to do is for our financial analyst and for our bond counsel, I don't know when we've ever gone out to bid. And I think it's just, now's the time. As soon as the budget is finished, the audit's finished, go out and just get a feel for what's out in the market. Are we getting the right services for the right price? Because these guys are not cheap. They're not cheap at all. And I think we should, just as due diligence,
I
since
agree.
we haven't checked it in a while, we should do that. And I already have Jerry Gay, he's put together the packages to do that. And we'll go ahead and do that. And there was a question, somebody had a question when we were going through talking with the financial advisor as to what they were charging us for all the work they did. And they don't charge us any fees. They only charge us when we actually go out to market. So the support functions of going through, putting together the packages that they put together for us and doing that analysis, that's kind of like their teaser rate. They do all that work so that they get your business to do the actual issuance.
Well, that's a good value for our money.
That's pretty standard out there. That's pretty standard out there. Okay.
Any other questions for the controller or the treasurer on anything in the finance department budget? Okay. Did you want an overview on the finance department while we're on that tab?
No.
Okay.
That's fine. That would be.
So what do I want to do next?
Let's move over to the selectmen budget.
Okay. Board of Selectmen budgets, you got the elected official salary, that's me. The Board of Selectmen, we do pay Sue and Harry a small stipend. The only big change that I'm asking for this year, after having gone out to market and looked at what people are paid, my executive assistant, Ginny, is severely underpaid for the job that she does, the amount of effort and time she puts in. She works a lot of nights that a lot of other people don't. She does an incredible job. So I'd like to bring her up closer to market and make her salary $72,000 a year.
Do you know how long she's been employed by the town?
About 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah. And there are people who have worked with the town in similar jobs for 10 years that make $18,000 a year more than she does. So those people would still make about $7,000 a year more than Jenny does. But I'd like to at least get her to parity. The stipend is paid to the
Do you
first.
have those comps? Are they in the book?
I'm sorry?
Can you provide those comps?
I'm sorry,
Can you provide those comps?
Yeah, oh yeah. The rest is pretty straightforward for the thing. The stipend is the first selectman in lieu of a pension. Our office supplies and equipment, we're a little over and we need to get some equipment, and that's, our budget had been cut and then it was put back. I would like to keep that because I need a couple desks and chairs for my office, for the conference desk. We've been working without them. I have 4 chairs. I'd like to get a couple more. And travel continuity, I moved that up for next year because I would like to go and attend the Munis conference this year in Boston. Next year it's probably not going to be in Boston. It's probably going to be in Phoenix or somewhere else. It's going to cost a little more to get there. They do have specific courses and flights that you take as a chief executive officer of the town with Munis training, and I'd like to do that. So that's why travel and continuing ads and dues went up by $1,000. And codified laws, that's Ginny has to, we use a company that keeps track of all of our laws and make sure that they're filed properly with the state and all of those things. It's a company that does it. We're going to have quite a few changes with the zoning, so I want to make sure that we're covered with that, so that when she gets them and shoots them up, that we're covered. And that's pretty much the only change that I have. Any questions?
Yeah, an overall salary. Can you give us a list of anybody that's above 2%, everybody, so we don't have to go through this on a line by line? Because most of them are 2%, but you got about 5 or 6 in here that are
Yeah, a couple.
running 10%.
Yeah.
And instead of painfully going through this, it should be noted. We shouldn't have to dig it out. Like you just mentioned it and we're up front about the position that you talked about, but it would be nice to have a list of how many employees are above the 2% threshold.
Okay.
A salary list of any magnitude should be very simple to pull and identify outliers, regardless of what.
Yeah, we could do
But
that.
sometimes, yeah, you're right. But it would be nice just to have a list.
Yeah, I sent out the
That's
salary
easy.
list, but I'll send it out again with the changes that I suggested.
Is there any way we can get a policy in place for pay raises? Like most companies have a policy, and I know we're not a company or a town, but generally there's objectives set, there's steps set, there's different like windows of 1% to 3%, and we seem to go from 2% to straight lined. Everybody's 2%, and then we have outliers that are 8, 10, 12%. That we really don't have any other than your word for what happens. There's no guidelines. There's no set like what we're looking at, and it sort of is
Most of our employees are union, and we're set on what we pay them. It's just the amount is the amount. Those who are non-union, the town has tried in the past to put in incentive programs to do a fully formal review process. That hasn't worked real well. I see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you. I had the same thing in my private industry experience. We have about 20 people that are subject to this information. The problem we have is in the town, everything's FOIable. Everything.
Right, but I don't understand why it's a deterrent.
Well,
I mean, FOIable is FOIable.
most of my employees had no idea what their coworkers made. Everyone in town hall knows to the penny what everyone else makes. It's not private. So once you go down the road, and I don't have an objection to this, and for people who have done exceptional work, I've asked for raises. But you set up a formal process like that in a very public place where everything's FOIable, and you can cause more problems than you stop. Because remember, if I write a performance review for somebody, that's FOIable.
Isn't that that's not a personnel record? That's
It's still FOIable. Unless it's HIPAA-related things like that.
But can't you see lack of policy gets us in trouble, and lack of policy leads to opening doors? Have we had lawsuits involving pays and not discriminatory pays and things like that? Have we had lawsuits in regard to that in the past few years?
Yes.
So wouldn't you think a policy would protect us when we're going to give some people 10%, since it is FOIable, and other people are getting 2%? Wouldn't you think that would be more of a benefit on a liability side than a negative?
I see pluses and minuses to it. I really do.
Would you be able, so it's a legit question, would you be able to get an opinion from our town labor attorney on whether or not it's a good practice in municipalities to put in certain policies, like band policies, is that what you mean? Pay bands and stuff like that?
Anything, I don't know, something.
Just something like that.
Because it is FOIable. One guy's getting 7, or one girl, woman, man, whatever, and the other one's getting 3, and why am I getting it? Why are you doing this? Because it leads to lawsuits, and I think that's happening.
Shouldn't good employees also be rewarded for being good employees and
Absolutely.
more than
Absolutely,
just
but that's why there's have something in place that gives you the vehicle to drive that.
No, I mean, as you gave the example, Ginny being paid so much less than others. I know our company, they do a review every now and then across certain job grades, and they make sure that I've gotten raises every now and then when I was below everybody else, but does that happen in the town? Does it look so that doesn't happen?
My experience has been over the last 6 months is we're losing people.
Right, and that's a reason why you would.
We're losing union people, and we're losing regular people, because in the town we've given, from what I can see going back, every single person has gotten the same raise as the unions over the last 10, however many years. That in itself can cause inequities, because we have some people who are better employees than others, that do more work, that work harder, that work weekends, that work nights. And it's, to a certain extent, that's true in the union ranks too, but we don't have a lot of control over that. You always have some people who are your top performers and some who are not quite as good. So the net result of the town, and the town has done a good job at keeping salaries down, but for like some of our union people, we just lost somebody who went to Bethel for $8 more an hour. Entry-level position. We are significantly below, in some jobs, significantly below every single surrounding town. And it hasn't been a problem for the last 6, 7, 8 years, because the economy has not been good. And towns haven't been doing a lot of hiring, and people have not been changing jobs. But now with the economy becoming better, with people feeling more confident in their ability to take a job and keep that job, we're seeing people leave. And and that's going to happen. You're going to have a certain amount of turnover no matter what you do. But you do not want your best people to leave. You don't.
So, I mean, I know, I believe that, in general, the Board of Finance, you request specific salaries, specific raises for specific people. And we don't have that level of knowledge of who's good and who's bad. That's your job. So is it possible for the Board of Finance to act more like the Board of Directors and say, here's the budget for salary increases for the year, and go allocate them as you wish, or have your department head to reward, as opposed to us saying yes to this person and no to that person without knowledge of their actual performance?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Actually, you know, it's the board of selectmen and the first selectman who decides salaries. If I needed to give somebody a raise, I could do that. I don't need the permission of the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance to do that. Although in practice, I actually do come to both boards and talk to you when we do something like that, right? A good example is our Director of Parks and Rec. We're in danger of losing him, and I gave him a raise, and we still lost him. But he got a much better opportunity. I mean, even if we matched the salary, the opportunity wasn't the same. But he's making he's now making $33,000 more a year. He got a 38% bump in his salary by moving. So part of what we do is we look at the overall market, what's out there. We do get the actual, I can look at all the towns that are similar size to us, similar number of people, similar budgets and revenues, and look at the salaries that they're paying people for probably 50, 60 different job categories. So we have a pretty good idea what the market is. And our labor lawyer is also very good at helping us and telling us, hey, this is where the market is for these things.
I think though what Dan was saying, maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, is we have a threshold, everybody got 2% and then everybody got higher. Most companies, we give the person 3% overall, and then you decide, some get 1, some get 0, and that relates to Ricky saying how you take care of your better employees. And if we had a policy in place with something that says we give you 3% overall, some people can get 6, some people get 1, depending on their performance reviews on people who know. Right now, we've given everybody 2% in this budget. Nobody got 2% or less.
Right.
So we're saying everybody's a 2% performer, and then you have outliers. And mostly, you would see some companies, you see 1% would be given to some employees, 4% would be given to others.
You're right. That's the way
And
we
this
did
is
it.
not really set up that way. And I think
No, it's
that's really where, and Dan's saying, why is everybody getting 2%? Are they all 2% performers? And if that's, what number or ranking are you in your corporation? And then why are other ones getting 7%?
You can't really do anything with the union.
Right, no.
No,
No, because a lot of these are
This
non-union.
is all
Right, a lot of this
non-union.
is non-union too.
Yeah.
And your other statement about people leaving, that's always going to happen in our area. You drive 30 miles south, you're going to get a better job. It's reality.
That's
I
true.
mean, if I drive 60 miles to New York City, my pay is going to increase tenfold. It's choices of where you're living. So raising people's pay does not necessarily guarantee longevity in this area. We live in a town, you go to Richfield, you're going to get a little bit more. You go to Wilton, you're going to get a little bit more. You go to Darien, you're going to go to New Canaan.
Yeah.
You make stepping stones. And we are, unfortunately, even with superintendents, stepping stones.
Yeah.
Mr. Lutz knew where he wanted to go, and he set it up nicely. And I'm proud of him. He's a Brookfield person, and he moved. But the goal is you head south to the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And we're always going to have that here, whether we pay people.
And some people are going to do that, you're right, no matter what.
This is what I'm trying
Because
to
money
say.
is their driver.
Exactly.
Not everyone is.
Not everyone, I
Not
agree.
everyone.
I will accept that.
It's a very difficult subject, it really is. But I'll check with our labor lawyer to see what information is FOIable and what is not. I know it has been tried in the past by previous first selectmen to say, okay, I'm going to give this person 4%, I'm going to give this person 1%, 2.5%, and it has proved to be an unmitigated disaster because there's no privacy. Salaries are FOIable. And people go, wait a minute, why did you give this guy 2%? I'm as good as him, you only gave me 1%. And you are never going to convince people that they're not as good as the next guy. There are a few people who are very, very self-aware and they know how well they're doing. But many, many staffers do not. Most staff think that they're in the top 1/3
If you
of
give an
performers.
appropriate performance review and honest, then
We don't have a formal performance review. Given the number of people we have, it's really hard to judge one person against another. You
I mean,
know,
FOI,
those are
I
jobs
don't
so
think it's any
different.
different than any other company, but I mean, everybody knows about what everybody's doing and making. I mean, people talk. So I don't know that it's a whole lot different.
Do we have a commitment to check with
Yeah,
the labor attorney?
yeah, we'll do.
Okay. Dan, I'll look into what maybe some history is for boards of finance on assigning, let's say, we say back to the first selectman, let's say, all right, your non-union salary, 3%.
Right.
Figure out how to do that. Whether everyone gets 1.5% across the board or what. Yeah, let me look into that.
Okay.
I'll do some checking around.
Thanks, Sean.
What else would you like to go over?
Does anyone have any more questions on the selectmen's budget? The rest, I believe, is, sorry, my pen's broken. That's all right. The rest is really departmentals.
So you have the 300 going down, you have the contingency, that's 350. Is that what you were suggesting?
400, right?
I mean, let's
Am I
go
looking
over.
at another one? I might
Where are you
have it on the
going?
spreadsheet.
Contingency?
Then let's go over exactly again what that 400,000 contingencies for. There was, I think, 300 and change to cover shortfall in state funding. What constitutes the rest?
We have not settled our union contract with the CSEA union. Although we have put in a 2% raise for all union employees, we may end up higher than that. We don't know, so we're going to need some backup there and some room to move. And that's our biggest union. We have decided with that union to go to arbitration because they were not moving at all on the negotiations. And we're very, very keen to have the new pension plan accepted by the CSEA. That's the hybrid plan where they would get a defined benefit for 20 years and then defined contribution thereafter. That is really important to the town for the long-term viability of the town. It's going to reduce a lot of the exposure we have 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, having the defined contribution after 20 years. I don't think it will save the money any hard dollars. The actual cost of doing the new hybrid plan is almost exactly the same as a defined benefit. But where we gain the advantage is in that when we go to defined contribution, we're limiting the size of the defined benefit plan so that if the markets go against us, we're not going to have as big an exposure. If the markets go down 20% on a $100 million plan, it's a lot different than the market going down on 20% on a $30 million plan, where you would have to refund it. So that's where we'll save a lot of the risk. We've been doing very well with our pension plans. We've had very good returns over the past couple of years. The new pension plan, we have what we think are the best providers. So we have a little room in the contingency. I don't want to discuss exact numbers in public as to what is in there for that.
Any other questions on contingency?
I mean, I think we should drop the revenue and shrink the contingency. I think that it just leaves too much open. If we drop the revenues down from what Malloy's proposing, shortcut the revenue.
Right?
State aid, drop that down to what he's proposing online in his thing, and then you take that out of the contingency. It just leaves too much money sitting there on the table. I think that
I agree with that.
it could be better managed. But I
It's a
understand we have
question
to
of leaving
leave
money in
some.
one place or another.
Yeah.
Well, if we take it out of the revenue loss, you're not holding it in an account and take it to the taxpayer. We have to manage it within our budget. So if we drop the revenue source down to what Malloy's talking about, the 999, the 122, you take 200,000 out of the contingency. When things arise, we have to manage them within the budget instead of going to the contingency fund. And I get what you're saying about the unions and we have to do certain things and leave some money there, but I think
prior years, if you really look at prior years, we had 50,000 in that account, 40,000 in that account, and we managed it. And the contingency, 2 of the prior 4 years, we've had $50,000 and $40,000. Last year, I know we went to, because we had no idea what the state was doing whatsoever. This year, he's produced a document online of where he's headed. So we pretty much have an idea where he's headed. Now, whether he goes there or not is a whole different story, but if we short sight it, the best thing that happens is he gives us the full amount. We then have that money.
Looking in past years, 2.5 years ago when I took office, we found out we're missing 3.3 million of the town's money, right? And I think that was a direct result of not doing our accounting properly, not closing out projects properly. We've discussed all the reasons, but I think if there was some contingency there, that maybe people would have said, hey, we're over on this project, I need to go to the Board of Finance, I need to go use some of that contingency, but since there was so little contingency, there was nowhere to go except for the general fund, and then it never came out. That's my personal opinion.
I get that, but that's fault in the system. In other words, if we have this issue, we're supposed to go through the process of you saying we don't have enough money, we go to the town, we go to a town meeting, and we go to, so that argument, I don't know.
My point there is, having a contingency is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, if we end up getting the money from the state, if we take it out and we drop the contingency fund, if we do get that money, where does the excess go?
It goes
It
into
just
the
goes to
general
the town
fund.
fund, goes to the town.
It goes into the general fund, which is to the good, because we want to build our general fund up to, I'd like to see at least 10% and closer to 12 or 13%. So then if we did have a hit, we could take the hit without having the rating agencies knock us down. That's my opinion.
I just think with less contingency, you really dig a little deeper into managing funds and looking at all rocks.
According to the budget best practices that training hosted by CCM, you do account for a contingency. I don't think there was a set guideline in there. It's more of a town policy, if you will. But something in there is a best practice. What that number is,
I think one
up for debate.
forces the departments to stay within their budget, because there's not going to be as large a pool to pull from. If you happen to go over, they're going to have to just manage tighter.
And I'm not saying cut it to the bone, but what I'm saying is you reduce the revenue side, and then you can reduce it. Because what's the personal contingency fund too? What is that? Personnel contingency.
That's what I was describing earlier.
That's for the union.
Yeah.
So now what we talked about, really we got $450,000 in the contingency fund. So this is what I'm trying to say. It's a big number that if we shrink the revenues down, there's money to cover enough of what we need to cover. Just my opinion of it.
Can you go over that again? I didn't follow you.
If we reduce the state grant from 1.1 whatever it is down to the 999, and we take the municipal grant that both Steve and I talked about, we don't know why it's there anyway, it's 274. He's reduced it down to 120, and he's presented this online. If you go online to the governor's website, it's there. His numbers are there. If we drop that down, we can drop down the contingency of the 400,000 down to at least 200,000. Because you got 50,000 already in a personnel contingency on the line below that to cover the union fees. So there's 450,000 in contingency in this budget right now, realistically.
Where's the personnel contingency?
The one below the contingency line.
Where am I missing it?
So are you
55917?
You at the end want to lower the state grants, all of the ECS, all of that, to what Malloy is saying right now, and also cut the contingency?
Yes.
So you're decreasing your revenues and you're actually
Decreasing my expenses. And if we get the money from the state, we're way to the good.
So it's left pocket, right pocket, but if we do get the money from the state,
And if you don't get it, you have no cushion.
right. And if you don't get it, you don't.
You
have
manage
that
to it.
cushion.
Right.
You have no-
Exactly.
You have no cushion.
You manage to your budget. You have a $200,000 cushion to manage to your budget.
Well, there could be unexpected.
process for unexpected is you go to the Board of Finance for a special appropriation, you bring it to the town for a vote, right? I mean, we're looking at a big increase right now.
Massive
We're looking at a
snowstorm.
huge increase to our
Additional
taxpayers
storm.
this year. We need to manage these accounts as best we can. I'm not saying you mismanage them, so don't think I'm saying that. I'm saying when you go down, when there's big contingencies, human nature is we got a contingency, take it out of the contingency, take it out of the contingency. When we narrow this down and we drop the revenue down, it makes us really dig for this money.
And would, and
But if you lower your revenue sources down, right?
And I lower my expenses.
And you lower your expenses, how much do you want to lower? What is it, about 220, 230, according to Malloy? And then you lower the contingency also,
right,
right?
Where else?
So they're offsetting each other
Right.
from an overall tax standpoint.
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
It's an offset. But it leaves less cash on the table.
Leaves less cash on the table to use it for an item of contingency, but not one identified between 1 and 11 months
That's
prior.
what I'm saying. Prior year's practice has been 40,000 in that account, 50,000 in that account.
Well, okay, noted. However, when we go back to, so the 50,000 is 15, 16, 16, 17. I think we bumped that contingency up because we were changing out the health plans, right?
That was a $400,000,
So there was-
which we had to, because of the transition. The state
Right.
mandated us to
Yep.
do that.
So there was a reason. There was a reason for that. It
Yep.
was a bit of a bogey, so we went up there. What we settled on 17, 18, I mean, that number was comprised of some stuff, right? We covered ECS,
ECS, special ed.
yeah, special ed, extra kindergarten
300,000
teacher.
was 300,000
Mhm.
was special ed.
Yep.
Ambulance, fire truck.
80,000, so 80,000 was the kindergarten, 200,000 was the ECS job, so
Mhm.
580 of that was strictly
I
on
think 300,000 was,
the Board of Ed side.
yeah.
Right, but they now have a formula they
Yeah.
built into their budget.
Right.
Their 779 is based on their formula, and
Right.
they built that into their budget. So what I'm saying is, the unknowns that we budgeted in $580,000 of last year's contingency are now knowns.
Right. Yes, and the way that we came up with those numbers, though, was pretty darn down to the wire through our almost month of budget talks, right? So I think if we were going to end all the talks now and not have any further discussions with the Board of Ed, let's say, or with other departments, to sniff out some what-ifs that aren't in the budget, we don't feel comfortable putting in the budget, then yeah, sure, maybe we could take that out, but I think at this point, we need to go through to the end and see if there is anything else before we go thinking about cutting that out.
Well, we're not making any decisions today.
No, we're just chatting.
But, right, I think the concept of, first of all, so you're suggesting that the two
What I'm
items are not necessarily married, that the revenue item and the contingency, which was identified as partially to offset decreases in the revenue, that number might be independent of that. So if you separate the two, just for argument's sake, I think it makes perfect sense not to budget for the maximum state revenue this year when history says it's going to be not the maximum, and I don't see why you would budget for the most you would get, as opposed to budget for something.
I don't think I said that. I was saying that before we jump to wanting a lower contingency, let's roll through the rest of the month. That's all.
Yeah, that's what
I'm going to recommend that you don't reduce the contingency, and I'll tell you why. Because you have 40 other funds, and the general fund will have to make those funds whole if they're not managed properly. And one of the reasons the reserve account was consolidated was because prior to 2016, it was not managed properly. So if those assets come due, your general fund's going to pay for them.
Why would we not manage our funds properly now?
They are managed now, prior to that, so that money was spent elsewhere. So if you had money in reserve and it wasn't managed properly, those funds were allocated inappropriately to pay for other expenditures. So if line items went over budget in capital, that money was used, so the money's gone. So I think it's my recommendation that you keep that cushion there another year.
So you're saying that past sins have not been absolved yet?
Exactly, and it'll be reflected in the audit.
So to cure the deficit, you have to fold out of your unassigned general fund balance, is what you're saying.
That is correct. The general fund will have to make that fund whole.
Now, for the last 3 years, I watch this like a hawk, and we're not letting any capital projects go over budget. I'm sorry, no, you can't do it. You cannot do it. If the schools go over on one, find the money. I'm sorry. This is projected for 250, you spent 260. I'm sorry, we're only spending 250. Find the money yourself. And that's why we took the canopy off of the fuel things, and we're watching these very, very carefully, and we're not over budget on any single capital item. We're not. And we have to watch it like a hawk.
But see, I could take that argument the other way and say we reduce the contingency down to 200,000 and watch your line items like a hawk. And if you can't go over, too bad on you. Find it, like you just said you do for the Board of Ed. Why wouldn't we keep that same
I'm talking
logic
about
in our
other
own house?
funds. I'm not talking about Fund 1. I'm talking about your other funds. Your capital funds, your reserve fund, your cash to capital.
When are we gonna get
if
on top of
assets
this?
come due for
No,
those
no.
funds from prior years, from 3 years back, say from some reserve account, and they never spent the money, your general fund is going to cover that. And those assets were not tracked properly in prior
What's
years.
what's the exposure?
What is the exposure? You're bringing this up. What's the exposure that we're talking about? We can't just make these statements and not have a quantifiable exposure.
Don't teach it.
I'm up to probably up to 300,000 to 500,000. You want me to estimate off the top of my head?
No.
We're gonna need an agenda item for our regular meeting to go over this.
Where are we going to cover this shortfall? Out of curiosity, when?
I mean, someone would have to go back and audit those prior years in that reserve account and figure out what those balances were. But those assets and those capital items were not tracked properly in the system. You'd have to go back and look at where your budget overages were in those other two funds. You're talking about
I'm
3
gonna
different
ask
funds.
A really dumb question, and I'm good at that. When can we fix this? How do we fix this? And what do we got to pay to
Well,
fix this? Because
We've been messaging.
It gets old.
I'd like to fix it. There is a module that I would like to buy that is used by Newtown that I think would help address this issue. The problem is that I can't go back and retrieve the historical information, not all of it.
A lot of it's not there.
It's not there.
So, I don't think, I think Kimberly's exaggerating. I don't think that exposure is so great, but for the last 3 years, we're watching every single project, every single item, so that it does not go over, that we know exactly every single expense associated with every single project, particularly if it goes over fiscal years.
And I
That's
agree
where a
with
lot of
that.
this comes from.
I agree with exactly every word you're saying right now. I do think
Yeah.
you are watching it like a hawk. I'm not
So-
going to say it any different than that. But if we got this problem that's sitting out there that we don't know about, and we're talking about holding contingency funds this year to cover this, it's so convoluted and so lost that what are we doing? Let's get it right.
Well, we've implemented the project code accounting. We've merged the funds. We've eliminated that reserve fund. So what it looked like to me that the projects were coded in the wrong fund, and then which would cause that particular fund to go over in a budget line item, and then the funds were not moved that were supposed to be moved from the general fund down to some of the other funds. So it's, you know, it's complex, and so I don't know how much time you want me to spend on 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16. So I can tell you from 16 forward, and I think Jerry Gay has mentioned this, that he has a lot of trouble
Yeah.
looking up the asset information from the prior years, prior to 16. So
What will it take to
But
resolve
2.5
that?
years ago, when we first recognized the problem we had with our general fund, we did call in forensic accountants. Sean, you were part of it. John, you were part of it. They came in and looked at what we had, and they said, there's no way. You don't have enough information here. We could spend $700,000 chasing this down, and the net would be, you're still out $3.2 million, or $3.3 million, and you just spent $700,000 to confirm that.
The Mahoney Sable exercise.
Right.
And I can tell you right now, we're okay. Like, we have enough money in capital, in our capital account, to cover what we have approved now for capital expenditures and to cover our bonded capital. We're fine right now. The risk is if something comes up from a prior year.
And do we just have to sit and wait, or is there?
I mean, I'm making an estimate out of the top of my head, and Steve's probably right. 5 is probably too high, but you know, I'm nervous, so that's aggressive. So
But
let's
as
be
you
more
said, the
conservative.
accounting wasn't in there.
They are very
Some
slim.
expense
He's
will
correct.
come flying through that we weren't aware of
Right.
from a project from 5 years ago. We're looking at probabilities in the 0 to 1%.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's
slim.
just we're not comfortable
But
because
there
we
is,
don't have every single.
and that probably was an exaggeration, but you know,
Why are we bringing this up then if it's a 0 to 1% probability, and now we have this on public record
Yeah.
that we just said there's a $300,000 to $500,000 exposure.
Well, you asked for, she said, you know,
She wants-
that's
To be fair,
ad hoc, she's, you know, off the top of her head.
you know, I don't
Not
have.
exact numbers.
You'd have to give me some time.
0 to 1% probability is not an exposure.
That's my guess. So the question is, do we want to go back and start researching this and spending many, many hours going after this?
No.
We're clean for the last 2.5 years. We know every single capital project we're doing, and we know how much we're spending.
So then that's not the reason for the contingency in the budget.
No,
but I
contingencies
still
for.
think you
Which
should-
was the
My
topic,
opinion-
which was the conversation where we began.
I still think you
that's
should
where-
leave 300.
She's just trying to play it safe.
I
I'm trying to
understand.
play it safe. I'm trying to protect you.
But I still believe that a contingency fund is there for exactly that contingency. Don't assign expenses to that contingency. A contingency fund should be there simply for something that's
right.
unforeseen.
Can't-
To Glenn's point, now we can argue
giving
how
you
much
an
you put in the
unforeseen
revenue
circumstance.
side and everything, and I
That's what I
see
was
your
saying.
point
They're
perfectly.
independent of each other.
All I'm saying is this year, we got caught up with 150,000 that wasn't there, 130, 150, that weren't really what we had planned on to use that money for. We had a lot of money put there. And I do feel that if we shrink that account down, it allows us to manage harder. It's just human nature. It's just a human nature process.
But maybe our compromise is that we drop the ECS grant and the municipal stabilization closer to Malloy's, but maybe keep the contingency.
I'm okay with a
higher.
compromise. I'm not saying I'm
Yeah,
against a
I'm
compromise.
just putting that out as maybe we could do one and not both as, I mean, and again, towards the end of the budget conversations, but.
I agree with that too. I'm just saying it's a
Yeah.
point to look at. It's a high number, and prior years have done with a lot less.
No, I agree.
See if anything comes up in the next 20 days.
Who's responsible for the town utilities? That was another.
Town utilities?
Yeah. What department? Is that under you?
Parks and Rec and Public Works.
Okay, because I had a question on that, but when I looked at the budgets, the Board of Ed had a 25% increase on fuel oil, and the town side had a 2% increase. And on the electric, the reverse, that the town had 18% increase, and the Board of Ed had 4.5% increase. Now, I would assume we use the same utility company, so electricity was either a 4% increase or an 18% increase, and the same would be said for fuel oil. Fuel oil went up 20 cents a gallon across the board, and we each use a certain amount, but on a percentage basis, the numbers didn't really look
Board of
quite
Ed noted
right.
that those are negotiated rates, though.
Yeah.
I understand
Jerry
that, but
negotiates them for
it should
both
be
sides.
20% to 2% and 18% to 4%.
I agree with you. I don't think the
So-
numbers are that bad. The difference between the town and thing, I calculated was one was 8% and one was 14%. Still, that's a pretty big difference. And I'll ask Jerry Gay, because this just came up to me. Kimberly mentioned it this afternoon. We used the numbers where Jerry has gone out and said this is where we think we're going to end up. I'm not sure what the Board of Ed did, but we can check to see how
I
they
just noticed a
achieved their
huge
number.
difference in the percentage increases
Yeah.
on both the line items.
That's a
So
good
I
thing to look at, because they should be very similar. I agree with you.
They should be, and that's what I'm saying. Before we bring in a department, I'd like to have that.
Mhm.
'cause it's-
Yeah, the Board of Ed, I remember they assured that those were negotiated rates.
I'm not saying the Board of Ed's wrong, so
No,
let me
just
be
that they-
clear.
But those are, that is their annual rate, like, that's already like a locked on deal. But we can
Right,
just confirm.
but even if we're buying separately, it should be similar.
Yeah.
They should be moving in the same direction, unless
Yeah.
somebody has a 5-year contract or something like that.
Then discuss it, that's what I'm saying, then let's
Because
figure
I
it
know
out.
we were looking to lock in. We'll look at it.
Since this is the Board of Selectmen's budget, the Board of Selectmen, I think last week, did cut from the education budget, about 180,000. Can we review that in your proposal?
Yeah, there were a number of items that Harry and I agree with him. We thought that two things. One, at the end of the day, we need to achieve a budget that we believe will be passed by the voters. And a 5.4% increase seemed to both Harry and I not to be something that, I don't think people would vote for that. I could be wrong. And in looking at the overall school budget, though, it's very hard to talk about specifics. Harry does have some experience having sat on the board, and he had identified what he thought were $233,000 in savings that they could achieve. I don't want to get into the details because that's not really our job to decide how the schools spend their money. But we did agree that we needed to get the school's budget under 5%. So we agreed on a number of $180,000 to get it under 5%. I think it came 492. I'm sorry it's not more scientific than that, but at some point, and Glenn said this once, you have to take a look at the numbers and then just make your best guess as to what you think the right number is.
Did you say that?
I did say that. He quoted me correctly. That was a year and a half ago. He quoted me correctly. Absolutely. Not gonna back away from it.
So that's how we arrived at that number. It's a big increase. But again, if you look at the schools, and I didn't think, we added in to the 17-18 budget, the amount of money we appropriated, the additional money we appropriated to the schools, right, to get their base budget from that year to this year. But if you add in the money that we put into the schools this year, both the schools from taking from other things, right, and the $470,000 that the town appropriated, that gives them a new base for this 17-18 actual expenditures of almost $1 million more than their original budget. If you compare that to the requested increase, it's nowhere near 5.4%. So what I'm saying is last year, if Colette and her team had known ahead of time that they were getting all these special ed kids, they would have asked for one heck of a lot more money, and we probably would have given it to them, which sets their new base budget. So if you take that new amount, add it to their budget this year, and then compare it to the increase they're asking for next year, it's nowhere near as big. It's nowhere near this 5.4%. So that's something to think about.
I absolutely understand that.
Because we funded these guys because they didn't have enough budget.
I don't see, I'm probably not looking at this right, but I don't see where the department request to the Board of Selectmen budget was cut. So
It's transposed numbers when you look at it. It's like the 203 to 2023.
Oh, is that? Look at that.
Yeah. I did the same thing.
Glasses. Look at that.
Like 5 times.
Thank you, Glenn. That's amazing.
That's what you meant. I knew you said that the other day.
Yeah.
It just came out to be.
When you look at it, it's the 203 to 2023.
Gotcha. How about that?
But the other thing on the Board of Ed budget, just so we are clear, and I'm not saying anything bad about it, I actually think it was pretty good. Once we give it to them, it can't be clawed back out. So even though it's a bubble year, if we appropriate 44 million or 43 million, and the special ed costs shrink down $1 million, that money we can't give back out due to the minimum state budget requirement for education. You can take back $13,000 per student decline in enrollment next year to take it out. So that budget's there to stay.
That's the whole budget or the amount
Once you
budgeted for special
appropriate
ed?
it, you can only claw back on an education budget the reduction of cost per student, I believe. And I could be corrected.
I think special ed is carved out from that.
No,
Because they
I'm
can
not talking
change
about the
so drastically.
2.5% increase.
No, I'm talking
back.
about,
All right.
if you give them a 10% increase and 8% of
Can we
that
check on
special
that?
ed.
Can you check
Yeah,
on
I'm
that?
pretty sure. No, Colette? You think Glenn is right?
Would you like to join us real quick?
No, I think we're talking about the same thing.
You're talking about 2.5%.
No,
No.
we're talking about the minimum
Colette,
budget requirement.
can you, if you're
Yeah, come
so
back.
able, please
Join
come
us.
join
You can
us.
be Lisa.
Yeah. Colette Sturm, everybody, chairperson of the Board of Education, here for a specific purpose at the table.
So you're talking about the minimum budget requirement on a yearly basis?
Yes, yes.
The only way it can be reduced is if you have, the only way it can be reduced is if you have a decrease
In
in the student
students.
population.
And then it's a formula based on what you pay per student.
Exactly.
And I think Brookfield is a $13,000 formula. So this, and I'm not saying we're cutting it, so don't look at me like we're doing that. I'm not,
No
but
one
it's just
said
something
that.
to be aware of if we grant all of this money, the next few years we have to be cognizant of that money is there to stay. It's like now it becomes a new baseline going forward.
Yes.
Unless she has, I'm saying the Board of Ed,
But-
has a decrease in amount of students, and then it, like I say, what you can take back is $13,000 per student. So if there's 20 less students, you can only take back that amount of money.
But the Board of Ed has the right and authority to not spend their entire budget, right? Let's say their
Yes.
special ed costs went down by half.
Absolutely.
They then could not spend that, and at the end of the year, return it to the town.
But we do understand this is a rhetorical question.
The chances of
No,
that.
there's no
The
reason.
The chances of
Zero
special
to
education
1%
coming
you're
down.
talking about.
Yes.
Exactly. It's just an aware point.
Yes.
You're right. It's probably rhetorical.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Makes no sense to me, but.
Anything else at all from anyone tonight? Going once, twice, 3 times?
No.
Okay.
Are we officially canceled for tomorrow?
If town hall is closed, then
No.
we have, so tomorrow night's,
That's.
one moment please,
Yeah,
one
yeah.
moment
There you go.
please. So if town hall is open, tomorrow's meeting is scheduled to be at town hall. If town hall is open, then we do have a meeting tomorrow. We have library tomorrow, we would have IT.
The schools are already closed for tomorrow, and the school administration is already closed tomorrow. We're gonna try to open, because it doesn't look like it's gonna be real bad in the morning, but my guess is we're gonna have to close early.
You would post that though? on the
Yes,
website?
absolutely.
Okay, so there'd be an announcement.
Yeah.
We posted an agenda, just in case the weather people happen to be
You
wrong,
have to come in.
this 50%. And if they are, then we have a meeting. If not, then we do not have a meeting. And as much as we can, due to schedules, will be pushed to Thursday, as it's noted at the bottom of the agenda. And if what we can't push to Thursday, we'll reschedule. Okay. All right. We had a little bit of discussion beforehand. I don't know if anyone listening could see that Ricky was taking notes on the file that we were all going through. What we are going to try and do this year is improve on the budget that is posted after all is said and done via deliberations, and the Board of Finance actually has the budget that we've approved as a board. So we are going to, and hopefully this sticks going forward, we will have a budget that is presented in a format where any changes or big ticket items will speak for themselves, as noted and decided on by the majority of the Board of Finance. We haven't done that in the past, and we're going to go ahead and do that this year. And any policies that we have in place, any agreements that we've made, we will be attaching to here. For example, the $150,000 remainder in the Police Outside Services Fund. That's been a handshake agreement. Something like that. We will do our best to put in writing and attach it to this, because that is a way of working for us, just like this budget is a way of working for us as a town. So that is something that we'll be doing. So it should be a more robust, more than 4 pages in a file for the town to look at and for us to look at when we look back. All right. Any questions or comments or concerns on any of that? All right, then we close new business. Do I have public comment to invite to the podium?
Yes.
Okay.
I promise I'll keep it short.
There is a timer which I will turn.
Turn on. You ready? Wait a minute, I can't see. How do you turn on this light? Okay,
Your name and address, sir?
name is Carmine Rossiciano, 6 Big Buck Lane. I have a few questions concerning what was presented here tonight. First thing is that I noticed the total budget increase was over 4%. I thought the state limited the increase to 2.5%. So I'm wondering why we're looking at a budget of 4.1% increase if in fact the state limits it to 2.5%. Second is that I keep reading news articles about the state budget deficit for the next budget cycle. It's now estimated to be over $1 billion again. I would concur with using what the governor posted as revenue sharing rather than the number that Steve had in. I think it's a more realistic number and provides us with the more realistic budget assessment going forward. Third is I would really be interested in how much new tax revenue is coming from new development, especially in the Four Corners district. I keep hearing it's a large amount, but I haven't seen any evidence of it in what was presented. Just as a matter of curiosity, I've heard around town that the current year's road paving budget was actually cut by $500,000 and those funds reallocated somewhere. I'd like confirmation or denial of it.
Right now, I can deny it.
Okay,
We did
that's
push
good.
it off because we
good.
were trying to save money.
But I'd like to
Still,
know that then that money on paving is actually being spent this year.
By law, we can do nothing but spend it on paving.
Okay, good. That's fine, I'm glad. 6, just a matter of format. 2005 and 2016 still has budget numbers on it, and 2016 and 2017 still has the budget numbers on it. I've heard we spend a lot of money upgrading our accounting systems. I'd like to know why there are not actuals in there so that we could more understand what the budget flow is on an ongoing basis. I mean, especially 2015 and 16. You know, it's 2 years from now. The 7th, I'd like to put my comment on the contingency. I've never liked contingencies. I've been involved in budgeting most of my life. I think eliminating the contingency and putting the expenses where it belongs really truly enhances the transparency in town financial matters and let us know exactly where it's going. Especially after hearing tonight that what the contingency was budgeted for in the last budget cycle was not really spent on what it was meant for.
That's time, sir.
That's 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I think between the folks here at the table, we can address your questions. Steve, I know you've talked before about the 2.5 cap versus the increases that you've proposed that potentially the Board of Finance will propose to the town.
For this fiscal year coming up, there is a 2.5% cap, but there is no penalty from the state if you exceed it. There will be a penalty starting next year, 50 cents for every dollar you go over that. Carved out from that is any arbitrated settlements, any long-term borrowing, and a couple other small things like special, not small, but like special ed is carved out too. So the fact that they allow you to borrow and not be penalized is going to push a lot of towns into borrowing so they don't lose their grants. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, but there is no penalty this year. This is a very unusual year. I never imagined when I first took office that we'd be looking at a budget increase like this. But given the perfect storm of things that have happened between special ed, state cuts, insurance going up, which you can usually expect that, but we're really hitting a perfect storm here. So I think we need to position ourselves to be able to weather that storm.
We're under the 2.5% now, though.
Yes, we
If
are.
you take special ed.
Yeah, if you take the special ed.
Administration, the salaries,
Yeah.
just so the town knows, we're
That's true.
Yes, we
I'm
are.
pretty positive we're well under 2.5.
Especially on the school side, because that's most of their salary.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to send a report up to the state, and we are
I
under.
don't see that
I don't
because
see
so
it.
the town knows it's not really an issue.
Yeah, for right now, it's not.
I agree.
And we do have actual versus budget. The board got it tonight. What else?
Yeah, we changed our chart of accounts, so there was a bit of a delay and more work that had to go into getting actual numbers moved into the budget report. So the budget that was given and presented up here had only the budgets in there, but we do have one with actuals, and what does get posted for the town to review with the comments, we'll have actuals next to the budget for each of those years.
When will that be done?
When we're done with our deliberations.
The Board of Selectmen budget should be up, the one we submitted. We'll make sure that that gets
You're gonna include
posted.
the
Somebody
actuals?
told me today they didn't see it.
But are you going to include the actuals up there or no?
We'll just do it the way,
Right, yeah.
because we've already submitted it, we'll send it the way.
Comparison,
Yeah.
the
We'll
backwards
make sure.
comparison is up.
Right.
Okay. Steve, you have one more, but I'll just wrap up.
Okay.
Your comments on the contingency. That's something that obviously we will be discussing, and we take very seriously that topic. So we'll take notes on items that departments may bring up, and we'll also, during our deliberations, discuss what has been proposed, and we will, as a board, vote on what actually makes it in there. So we hear you, and it is something that we will be discussing and deliberating on. Okay. I think the last one that I think we can comment on, tax revenue from Four Corners Development, Steve?
Yeah, the biggest development we've had so far is Brookfield Village. The agreement that we put in place of them 4 years ago or so really gives them, you can like this or not like it, but there's literally no increase in their taxes for right now the first 3 years. And then it will slowly ramp up. We're giving them a $1.3 million abatement. We're hoping very much that they achieve a 70% occupancy on their commercial space, because then they're required within 1 year to build the next 2 buildings, start that. And that will help with offsetting that 1.3 million. Tony Lucera is building the Enclave. He's now negotiating with his bankers. He hopes to start that soon. We don't have any other huge projects that are really throwing off any revenue right now. We do have the supermarket. It looks like that is going to move forward. We're negotiating with them right now. And that will generate probably $200,000, $230,000 in new taxes. The tax abatement, we're working with them, will give us some immediate increase in taxes. We do not give them 100% free ride. We have to get some revenue from these projects, in my opinion. And so with some of the other projects, I think it's the next 2, 3, 4 years where we'll really see some of these bumps coming in. But right now, we're not seeing it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any objections to answering questions that are raised by the public if we have the information on the spot?
I don't, as long as we have the time. Sometimes it can just get pretty long if you do that.
Well, as many questions as they can ask into it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the meeting, not the.
Sorry, at the end of the meeting and at the end of the conversation, not interaction. Let us
Yeah.
address it as they come out.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
like
just the way
tonight.
this was.
Yeah, just
Right.
like tonight, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's fair.
And that being, can I just address Karma, your first comment, you asked about the information being up, did you mean the agenda?
Yeah,
or
I
the-
looked today to see what was being presented, and there was nothing on the website.
The agenda did go up today, we had to correct it because I had a date wrong on it, but I know that Lisa posted
I looked
this
at
morning.
4:30 for this presentation.
Oh, that.
Talking about,
And I
yeah.
didn't see it.
Yeah.
That I don't know about.
Well, this was just updated at 6 p.m.
Yeah, I was just asking, if you have the presentation, put it on the website so people don't come in and not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's always our goal, to get it up as soon as possible so people can see it.
Yeah, this was being worked out up until 6 p.m. I don't know if you could tell in
Oh,
the.
no, I couldn't.
Yeah. It's this time stamped that this was just completed at 6 p.m. So it was just.
So we're agreed, we'll put up the Board of Selectmen's proposal to the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
and then we'll let the Board of Finance decide what you want to put up as an interim basis. I don't know if you do or you don't want to put anything up that's partial.
There's nothing to put up.
Up to you guys.
No decisions whatsoever.
Yeah,
So there's
no.
nothing.
Right. Absolutely.
So the board of selectmen.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get that up. We'll make sure that's up tomorrow.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
You have it.
Okay. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. 5-0. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.